All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stream. I hope everybody is doing well tonight. We are going to continue on with our item editor and get at least imports and exports working via the editor portion of it tonight. We'll see if we wind up getting that in the into the game code as well. But for now, we're just going to try and strive to get that working. I did do a couple of things off camera that I'll just quickly go over. Nothing major, but just to kind of move it forward a little bit so that hopefully we can just kind of crack on with the actual development of it, right? So, with all that said, before we get started and jump in, I do want to just take a quick second to thank the supporters of the channel, beginning with our elite partner, Javier Olazaran. That is the top tier of subscription over there on YouTube memberships and Patreon. I would also like to thank our partners, Gerbolis Inc. and Matt Oscard. That is the next tier of subscription over there on YouTube memberships and Patreon. Followed finally by our supporters listed here. They are a combination of the other tiers of support over on Patreon, YouTube memberships, and Twitch subscriptions. So thank you all very much for your support. It means a lot to me, and of course, I would not be here without all of you guys, the viewers, whether you're catching it live on the YouTube side, the Twitch side, or if you're catching the VOD after the fact. This project would not exist without you guys. So thank you very much for that support. Okay, so with all that said, tonight we are going to continue with our custom external tool. So we have our item editor here again. Just a quick recap on this. We are our engine and our game is built in C, but that doesn't mean our external tools have to be. So this is an external tool that we're using for our RPG. And what we're doing is we're creating a sort of, I called it the item database. It's not technically, I guess, accurate because it's going to contain more than that. It contains items, and it also contains string localization as well, right? In 3 different languages for now. And so this will more than likely be expanded to include other things as well. But the idea here is that we want to have a simple to use editor here where we can just have this list of various fields. And then we also want to be able to export this to a format that the engine can then understand. And my initial plan for this was to have it export to a sort of INI/CSV style format, and then have the engine sort of convert that into a binary format. But the more I thought about that, the more I thought about it, maybe that just doesn't make as much sense. So we are going to cut out the middleman on that, and we are going to roll strictly with a binary format. So we're going to talk about what that binary format's going to look like, how we're going to generate it, how we're going to export that, and then import it as far as this is concerned. And then we'll basically be able to lift that same sort of import logic as a whole over and utilize that in the game code as well. So I hope all that makes sense. That's kind of a loaded explanation there, but yeah. All roads lead back to web development at some point, yeah. This was just a lot easier than trying to build this editor in the engine, which would have been overkill anyways, frankly. So, this was a lot quicker to stand up, right? I've actually done almost no work on this off camera except what we're about to touch now, which is maybe 10 lines of code. And so, this was just the right tool for the job in this case. Sleepy Mushroom, good to see you. How are you doing? I was wondering, what's your thoughts on incremental games? Incremental games. I'm not sure I know what you mean by incremental games. Could you define that a little bit? Or clarify that a little bit? It might be something I'm aware of and I just don't know the terminology for it. That happens all the time. All right. So I got to figure out what's causing this. But clickers or idles game, or a combination of both. And you're good. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so like when you say clickers or idles, do you mean like hide and, or not hide and seek, like I Spy kinds of games and stuff like that? Like where you have to find objects and that kind of game? Is that what you mean by that? If I were to go with making one of those, I'd probably make it on the web, actually. Truth be told. Let me see. Let me have a look. Let me try their web version. I'm just gonna do this off camera just for a second, and then oh, okay. You're talking. I think I know, I think I understand what you mean. You're talking about like one of these things. So it's like the is it like the kinds of games where you make like different food items and sell them and that kind of thing? Yeah, these are cool. I've never made one of these though. But yeah, those are cool. I've never made one. That'd be an interesting thing to do though at some point. Maybe for like a game jam or something, I could make one if I ever get time. Okay. Where were we? Okay. So when we start talking about the file, actually, let me go over here and clarify. So we were initially talking about a file format that looked like this, right? I'm going to dispense with this format. This is not something we're going to do, so let's actually just delete that. And what we're going to wind up instead is just a binary file here, which I've actually already kind of created one off camera, right? And so the way that this works is we essentially create a array buffer, which for now I've hard-coded the size. We're going to have to calculate what that size should actually be. And then we create a data view, and then we essentially write out the individual properties to that, right? So in this case, all I'm doing right now is just setting a header item with a magic number in it. So we're using this as our magic number. This is kind of the magic number that we use throughout our game engine on the C side to actually indicate the first bytes of this file should be this magic number to tell us that this is actually an asset that belongs to our engine and it's not something else, right? And so that's going to be the very first thing that we write, and along with some other header information, and then we'll kind of continue from there. And then, so once we actually write out all of the file data, then we go ahead and we create a blob. We create a object URL for that, and then we create an anchor tag, sort of dynamically, and attach it to the body, and then call click on it. And what that will do is, because we're setting the hyperlink reference to the URL that is generated here, what that's going to do is that's going to download that binary blob with a file name, default file name of itemdb.bin. So this will prompt that download, and then we go ahead and remove that anchor tag from the body, and then destroy the URL that we've created, right? And so that's how our export works. And what that'll do is that'll download the file here, right? And the way that we're going to work this is whenever we export, we're just going to download it into the item editor folder so that we can then pick it right back up. So what do I mean by pick it right back up? Well, we also have a import binary file that takes in a URL. This is just the simple fetch API. Make sure we actually get the file, and then here we retrieve the array buffer from that response. We create a new data view from that, and then we basically just reverse all the operations that we do up here. And that allows us to read it, right? So for now, we're just outputting a simple the magic number that we have that we read in as a uint32, and then we change that to base 16 so that it's hexadecimal, so that it comes out the same way that we actually added it here. And so after all of this is done, and after we read all of our records and stuff like that, we'll essentially be replacing these steps here with everything that we read out of the file. So the way that this works right now is in our document onload, right, which is hooked to this guy, all the way at the bottom, just before we say, hey, we've got the state initialization complete, we import a binary file called itemdb.bin. So the advantage to this is because we're using live server to actually host this, right, and run it, when we save this file, what's going to happen is the page is going to refresh, and it's going to automatically reload this new binary database file automatically, right? So every time we save it, if we save it into this folder, it automatically updates the page with all of those new entries as well. So we're using the same file to import as export, and we just kind of keep refreshing the page that way, and that makes our application lifecycle very easy to use, because we don't have to like pick a file on disk every time we refresh the page and stuff like that. It just automatically happens. And then once we have this far enough along to where we're happy with it, we've got records in here that we can then read, from it and whatnot. At that point, we would go over to our game code that's written in C, and we will then write a deserializer there, where we can then load all of those database items into memory over on that side. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. Like a numbers go up type of game. Yeah, numbers go up type of game is always, those can be very addictive, right? Because incrementing numbers are always, it always pushes you to kind of keep going, right? So yeah, that's a very powerful thing for sure. All right. So, with all that said, we should probably start thinking about some of the data that we want to export. Now, if we take a look at, let's see, what was it? Okay, asset types, I think. So you can see here we have the asset magic number here of 0x Cafe Babe, and then we also have a 64-bit variant of that. I don't think we're going to need to use the 64-bit variant for this. I think we're going to treat all numbers in this database as 32-bit unsigned integers. Or, well, maybe some of them will be signed. We'll see. And then, let's see, we have, how do we want to, I thought we had, yeah, we have a header here. So we have a binary asset header that's defined in C. And we're going to mimic this in our, we're going to mimic this in our database file, right? So I'm actually just going to copy this for reference. Obviously, we can't use this directly in JavaScript, but that will at least get us kind of where we need to be, right? So let's put that, I guess, here, right? And we'll comment this out. And so we have a magic number, right? We have that, the type, the K asset type, which is actually something, that is actually something we need to investigate, right? So we're not going to actually have an asset type that the engine is aware of being any different than some of our internal types here, right? Because this is something that is highly game specific, and our core engine doesn't need to know about this. So we want to use asset type binary, which is value 9, right? And so, you know what? I'm going to do that, because if we were to ever move these around or whatever, that could actually mess things up if we put anything ahead of it, right? So let's actually define all of these, because that could get, since we're now referencing this outside the scope of this C code, it's possible that these numbers could change if we aren't careful, right? So by hard coding the values like this, we'll never have to worry about that. If we add another one in and it's like out of order or something stupid, at least it's not going to break all of our logic internally or externally. That depends on these values being something consistent, right? So we're going to go ahead and use 9. I'm just going to copy this over, and we're just going to paste this right here. And we're actually just going to grab this, paste this here, and let's actually do, whoops, let's actually take this, and let's go here, right? And for this one, we are going to be, let's see, we need to have an offset in bytes. So this is 4 bytes. So we're going to be 4 bytes in now. And the value we're going to use is 9, right? And so that's kind of the way that this is going to work. So we have that. And then the version of this, we're not going to bother versioning this, but we still need to include that information nonetheless. So we don't actually need this. And then data block size. So data block size is actually going to wind up going hand in hand kind of with this guy, right? So I think what we're essentially going to have to do, because array buffers don't grow dynamically, right? You can't just keep shoving data into them. You have to know what the size of the array buffer is ahead of time. And so we need to figure out the size of our header, right? And then the size of what the data block is going to be, or essentially the huge block of code that comes after the header, that will contain everything else that we need. And that is going to be the size of the array buffer is going to be the header size plus that, right? So I think what I'm going to do for right now is I'm going to say const header size. And this is going to wind up being, 16 bytes. Yes. Yeah, 16, right? And then we'll do a const data block size. And we're going to say this is 256, right? And I'm going to take this and put it here. And here we're just going to say header size plus data block size, right? So that'll give us all the data that we need, and then all we have to do to plug this in and make it dynamic is just plug the actual value of what our data block size is going to need to be here. So here we can just say you can see 12 bytes in. We're going to use data block size. And that is going to be the end of the header, right? And then we're going to write the DB entries. So that's going to be the next thing that we're going to have to think about a little bit. I don't know, did I actually show in here, we actually are spitting out this correctly. So we do know the file import out export is working correctly, by the way. So we do have this export button here. I can click that. This is already pointing to the right folder. So all I have to do is just not append a 1 there and save, overwrite, and it'll come up, right? And so that makes our whole our whole cycle here pretty straightforward. Let's see. MDS Ubuntu with a 3-stream streak. That's awesome. How are you doing? Appreciate the support there. Sakelis Music, it's great to see you as well. How are you? Hope you're doing well. Okay, so great to be seen. Nice. I like that answer, actually. Doing okay? Fair enough. Okay is better than bad. Okay. So, right now, there are two things that we need to store. There are strings, and then there are items. And each one of these items, I think we had decided in the database we're going to have all the columns available for all items, which, yes, technically eats a little bit of space, right? But like, it's going to make lookups lightning fast. So what that essentially means is when we go to calculate how much space we're going to need to calculate two things. So we're going to need to calculate the number of items we have. And then for each one of those items, we're going to need to calculate how much space each one of these fields takes up. Now, we don't store any strings directly here. The only thing that we store on items, let's see, these are all actually integers, all the way down. I think everything is integers, right? So that makes this nice and easy. All we have to do is count the fields and say, okay, we have this many integers plus, times 4, right? Because we're assuming everything's going to be 32-bit integers. Whether it's signed or unsigned is irrelevant as far as figuring out the size. So that is going to be pretty easy to do in terms of storing the items and all that, right? And the way that we'll do it is we'll store, we'll essentially create an array for each one of these columns. And we'll store the values for each item in that array. And then the IDs essentially will be the index into those arrays. So it's a very data-oriented sort of approach that we're taking with this as well. Strings are going to be a little bit different, though, because strings really only ever need... there's strings are a little bit layered, right? So a single string entry, right, is just a value. And then its ID is really just an index into the array, right? That's really all it is when you think about it. And so storing the strings themselves won't be terribly complex, I don't think. But there's a couple of ways that we could handle this, and we need to really think about how we want to do that, right? So first off, we're going to have multiple strings tables, right, with multiple sets of IDs, right? So there's going to be one string table per language, right? So it'll be like a language string table. And each one of those tables is just going to essentially have an array of strings. Now, when it comes to storing those individual strings, there's two ways that we could do it. We could either store a string of a dynamic length, where we store the length of that string and then the string itself plus probably I guess we don't need a null terminator, right? We could figure that out and see without having to store the null terminator. But for each record, we'd want to say, okay, this is how long it is, and then here's a pointer to the actual data. And so we need to store those two pieces of data, right? And we need to do that once per language. Right, so we have all of these strings in Brazilian Portuguese and Japanese as well, and so we would need to either support a dynamic length of a string, or we could say, all of our strings have a particular length, like a max length, and we just set up an array of string arrays for that max length, and we can't exceed that length of a string. And then, all strings essentially can take up that same amount of space all the way down. That to me seems like a huge waste of memory. It might be a little bit faster in terms of lookups because you don't have to store the size along with it. You could just look at the string directly. But I think we're going to go with the first method of doing it, where we get the length of the string in bytes, not like character count, right? And where this really matters is a language like Japanese that has multi-character or multi-byte characters, right? So some of these Japanese characters are 2 bytes a piece. There are 3 bytes, 4 bytes. There's even 5 and 6 when you're talking about UTF, right? But we're not supporting 5 or 6. So we only support 1 through 4. But I think that's going to be the way to do it, right? Is we're basically going to just store the UTF-8 string, and we'll go that way. So the only thing that I don't know in JavaScript, off the top of my head, I don't remember this. If I copy this value and, oh, really? Okay. If I copy this value, and I just realized I am coding behind my head. Let me move this over here so you guys can see it. What if I do length? Oops, it's not a, right? This is going to give me 7. This is problematic, right? Because 7 is the length of the number of characters we have here. But it's not the actual byte length, right? So I don't know, let's see. I don't know if do we actually have like a UTF-8 or like a size, not font size? We might have to look that up. Gets because we can have multi-byte code points, right? There's apparently an API for this. Oh, I could use a blob for it too. That seems kind of dumb though. Okay, so apparently I've never actually done this in JavaScript. I've never actually had to get this. So let's see. Apparently, one suggestion I'm seeing, let me see if this works, is people are saying that you can do new blob, right, and then pass in that, right, and then use size 21. So that's actually what I would expect, right? Because these are multi-byte characters. Seems kind of crazy to me to actually have to do this every single time to get the actual byte count. I feel like there's got to be a cleaner way to do that. Nivy how's it going? Good to see you. But I'll tell you what, we will go ahead and, what if I do this with a regular string, right? What does it give me for that? Does give me what I expect. So maybe we'll just do this for now. And then if we need to find something a little quicker, we can do that. But again, unless this really becomes really stupidly slow, I don't think I'm going to worry about it. So I think what I am going to do is let's actually just take this and we'll wrap it in like a convenience function, right? So we'll say, I guess we'll go to the top here, function string UTF-8 length. And then we'll do that, right? We'll return, or I guess this would be string byte length, right? And then this would take in the string, and then we would actually get the size in bytes of the particular string, right? So that's one thing that we definitely have to figure out. Okay. So we have that. The other thing that we're going to need, I guess when we go to store, we're going to have to keep like a running offset, I guess, which I think we're going to have to do anyways. We're going to have to... We're going to have to get the byte length of the string first, store that first, so that when we go to read the string out, we can actually get it, right? And then store the string itself, which I don't think we need to store the null terminator because we actually know exactly how much we have to pull. And then when we do the next entry, it's going to be the next length, and then the next string, and then the next length, and the next string. And then we'll have to do that once per language, which will be defined here. Right, so we'll do English first, Brazilian Portuguese second, and Japanese third. I think that makes sense. Text encoder encode string length. Okay. Let us try that. Do I still have it? All right, so I guess it's just text encoder. And then, encode. And then pass the string. And then length. Oh, probably needs new. Okay, so that gives us the same thing. So I wonder if text encoder encode, I wonder if that is any different than, I wonder if, is it better to use this, or is it better to use a blob? That seems a little cleaner with the text encoder, not gonna lie. So maybe we'll go ahead and put that in here, and what I'll do is I'll just comment this one. Right, so we could return new text encoder, encode string.length. That does seem cleaner though, thank you for that. EU JS, yeah, JS strikes again. Oh, Sergeant Pepper, you suggested that too, okay. Syntax Wraith, how's it going? Let's see. Oh, it looks like I missed a few messages in here. Okay. Oh, the convenience of JS. Are you not entrained yet? I mean, entertained yet? Yeah. I mean, JS is it has its advantages and disadvantages for sure. For sure. Yeah, so the reason we're doing this is just because it's an external tool that we're not releasing anyways. I just needed to make items, right? So this is a nice quick way for us to do that. blob.length doesn't do the same. Text encoder is faster. Okay. Yeah, like I said, I hadn't had to do that directly in JavaScript before. The way I've always handled it is the C way of handling it, which I did in the engine itself. So I've never actually had to do it this way. But that's good to know. Thank you. Always learning things. I like it. All right. So I guess the next question is, what do we do first? What do we store first? I feel like we should probably do items and then strings. I just realized we are actually missing a property in here. And I'm pretty sure we had it in here, and we just nuked it somehow. Which is quality. Yeah, we don't have quality in here. Cool. Yep, it's here. Between cell value and weight. But I guess we never actually added it. Yeah, we never added it here. So we actually need item quality. We need to add that. Okay. I guess we should just do it the same way no matter what the type, right? I guess we could just put it in that same spot, right? So we could just do quality ID, right? Thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. C++ 77. Can I rant to you about something unrelated? Just annoyed IRL. Life is unfair. Sure. Go for it. I'll do my best, but yeah, I understand what you mean. Lots of us have those types of issues, unfortunately, that come up, you know. It's how we deal with them that defines us. So I said was it between value and weight? Is that what I said? Yes. So between value and weight, we'll go ahead and add that here. And we'll go ahead and add that here. And then we'll do this dot quality ID equals quality ID. And again, we'll just do that in between value and weight. And between value and weight. Okay. So how do we... We need to put in here description. Okay, so between value and weight, we need another one of these guys. So let's put this here. We'll put quality, right? And actually, instead of this being a drop down, instead of it being a text box, rather, it's going to be a drop down. So let's go ahead and grab that. And we'll put this there. And this is going to be item quality. And then, let's see, we had this defined here. Junk, uncommon, rare, epic, legendary. So we'll just go with that same common, uncommon, rare, epic, legendary. I think that was what we had, right? Junk, common, uncommon, rare, epic, legendary. Okay. And we also are gonna need strings to represent those too. Which means we do need a string ID. Although we can. How do I want to handle that? I don't know how I want to handle the string aspect of that yet. Let's see. Okay. I'm just reading your message really quickly. Give me 1 second here. Oof. Yeah, I see what you mean about that. Yeah, I can sympathize with you on that one. C++ 77. I've had similar things happen to me. Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from on that. Yep. I know very well what you're talking about. All too well, unfortunately. Yeah, like I said, what defines you is how you handle that situation, right? You know, dust your shoulders off and keep pushing forward. Don't let it get you down too much. Take your time, understand it, understand how you feel about it, and then do your best to try and push forward. And don't sweep it under a rug and forget about it. That's not what I'm suggesting either. Feel it through, deal with your feelings on it, allow yourself to feel those things, but then as quickly as you're able, try to move forward. Because if you don't deal with it, it's going to come back and bite you later. So, Dr. Elliott, good to see you. Yeah, I think there's definitely probably some other folks here in chat that could actually sympathize with you on that as well. I try not to mention too much of that stuff personally online myself, just because my name is out there. But yes, I understand what you mean. Wink, nudge. Okay. So we need to define these strings as well. I'd like to actually use the editor to do this. So what we're going to do is we're just going to add item quality for right now, which is going to be just this dropdown. And actually, I don't think we need the onChange for this. I think we can just get away with just this, right? And so this is going to be I guess this is just going to be the quality of the item. Typically determines its value or usefulness. All right. So as far as how that's going to work as a property, the first thing we're going to have to do is obviously get a reference to this guy. So we need to go down here, and we're going to get, let's see, we have the value. Let's see, where is, it's going to be up here somewhere. Am I not? Oh, right here. Okay. So right between value and weight is where we're also going to put this. So we're going to say item quality value. This is going to be we're just going to say, I guess I could change this to value. That's fine. Right? So we'll get that. And then when we go to apply current item, we'll do that first, I guess. So we'll do item dots quality ID equals state item value, item quality value dot value. And that's going to have to be a %, because JavaScript likes to use strings, even though we have numerics here. We can't really say that they're numerics because JavaScript tells us no. All right, so we have that, and then when we actually switch the item, that's going to be in here, let's see, right here. So we need to have that as well. So this is going to be quality value and quality ID. All right, and then down at the bottom of this file, where we have all these equipment items and all this good stuff. Let's see, where did we put that? That was type, string, cost, value, quality ID. So it's the 7th property. Okay. So it needs to go right here, right? So this first item is a nothing item, so that's a nothing burger, essentially. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 7 is actually going to be right here. So in this case, it's Rusty Dagger. We are also going to say it's junk. Oh wait, no, that's a health potion. It's going to be 1. Let's see. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're going to insert this here. This is the Rusty Dagger. So the Rusty Dagger itself is going to be, we're going to say that's a junk item. And then the key item that we have here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The key item, let's just actually say that that's uncommon. Right? Let's use uncommon for that one, just so that we can kind of see that the field is working the way that we think that it should. That's junk, that's common, the Rusty Dagger is junk, and the skeleton key is uncommon. Perfect. Okay, so let me just make sure that this also saves the way it should, so I can change this to rare. Hit apply, switch off of it, switch back. Oops, that was this one, rare, and it stuck. Okay, perfect. So that is added. Let's see. Yeah, C++, I've definitely seen that that happen. A lot of times it has to do with how they interview, like what Sergeant Pepper is saying. If they interview really well, then yeah, that can happen quite easy. And I would agree with Sergeant Pepper's advice. If you're really that unhappy, I think you might need to start looking. Yeah, I would follow his advice for sure. And I would also say, even if you are relatively satisfied with where you're at, it's never a bad idea to keep an ear out for what positions are out there in the industry, right? Because you never know. You might find something, or something might find you. So it's always a good idea to at least keep an ear out. Maybe you'll find something better maybe you'll find something within the company. Maybe you'll find something even better outside that company. You never know. I've been working there since late February. I mean, yeah, 1 month and 2 weeks is kind of soon to leave, I would say. But if it's not, that's a tough call, right? Because it's like, what is your prior experience with stuff, right? Like, I feel like if you're just starting off, like, that probably will be okay. I wouldn't probably list it on my resume at that point. If you think that you find something else that is much, much better, that you think you'll stay there for years on end, then yeah, absolutely, it would be worth moving. But yeah, I also would not stay somewhere that you absolutely hate for too long. If you've been there for like a month, you kind of have to go with your gut on that, right? Is it something that you know you're going to hate doing going forward and you just need a way out, then start looking for something else. But yeah, I hope that helps a little bit. Have you ever taken a peek at UE's gameplay tags? I have not. They might be. I think I roughly know what they are though from context, and it's going to be something that we're probably going to wind up having in a lot of things ourselves. So C++, there's not really a set time that's good or bad, right? You just have to do what you think is right. If you're fresh out of college, then that's one thing. The only thing I would say is if you do hop from one place after only being there like a month or 2 months or something like that, I probably wouldn't even bother putting it on my resume. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's fair enough. Once you get into something else, then maybe remove it. But yeah, it's kind of a slippery slope, right? Hierarchical strings, essentially. Super useful for gameplay related things. So like character.ability.normal, and you can search in a gameplay tag container for all tags of character.ability, for example. Oh, I see what you mean. I could see where that would be useful for doing a single time query on something, but it's not something I would want to do every frame because I feel like that would be expensive with all the string processing. I think. But yeah, I see where you're going with that. Sounds ECS-ish without being ECS. Yeah, I mean, that's not entirely inaccurate either. You feel better after ranting? Yeah, sometimes that's all it is too. Sometimes you just got to get it out, right? So I'm glad that helped you at least in that way. Okay, so I guess probably what we ought to do is start thinking about what our array needs to look like, right? So we have all of these properties for items, and we essentially are going to keep arrays for all of these, which I think even still they're all integers. Some of them unsigned, some of them signed. So I think what it's probably going to do, what's probably going to be best, is for us to take account of the fields minus the ID, because the ID is really just going to be an index into the array. I don't know why this keeps doing that either, but anyway. It's really just going to be an index into the array. So really it's going to be, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So we have 24 fields at the moment, all of which are integers, right? So, some quick math on this would be, and I guess we could kind of split this calculation up, right? So, item field counts equals 24. And then we would have const item counts equals state items length. I think items is what we called that, right? Yeah, items. All right. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take these two numbers and multiply them together. And then multiply those also by 4, because each integer is 4 bytes, right? So I guess we'll say item data block size is going to be item field count times item count. And then we're actually going to do item field count times 4, right? And so each field is a 32-bit int. Let's see. Use LLVM and Clang a lot. Any idea why it would detect a macro expansion as a function declaration? That's hard to say without seeing some code. I have a couple of ideas, but like without seeing code, I can't really wrap my head around it. Let's see, just frustrating. Had 800 plus applications, landed the job doing stuff because I needed the money, and I helped my friend out, and he got promoted. Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of backstory that may help you feel better, or maybe not. I don't know. This may help, it may not. So when I got out of college, I put in well over 500 applications. I actually stopped counting at 500 applications over the course of about 6 months or so, and wasn't finding anything until I finally landed on a job that was completely unrelated to anything that I went to college for whatsoever. It was a low-paying job, but it was my foot in the door somewhere, right? So I took that, and I was making pretty low pay, and I do mean low pay, right? And this was back in like 2008, 2009. Yeah, 2009. So, the stock market the job and stock market just took a huge poop, right? And so that's when I was trying to find work. And I wound up taking this job, and it was basically like almost like a support desk type of position is the closest thing that I can relate it to for a proprietary piece of software, right? And I did that for a little bit, and then hated it, but was able to kind of move my way into a QA position there. I think that was maybe a year later or something like that. And I stayed at that position for about a year before I moved into something that was a little bit more technical, almost like a second level QA support. And then eventually I was able to actually move into dev at that same company. So I was able to sort of like ladder my way through it. So like, even though it was not a job that I wanted to do, and it was not a job that I enjoyed at the time, it was something that got my foot in the door, where I was able to then a year later get closer to my goal, and a year after that get closer to my goal, and just keep moving that way. And that eventually I wound up getting a lot of good development experience from that company, where I was able to then jump to something else. Yeah, so you may want to think about it from that perspective. Like, maybe that position sucks, but if it could act as a springboard to get you into something that is closer to what you're looking for, even if it's not the thing, but then you could springboard again later on, that might be worth doing. As far as like the possibility of you advancing within that company, that's completely dependent on you and the company, right? That depends on all of that, right? I definitely can't make that call externally, but that certainly is a valid option, right? And I will say this, having gone the QA route, because I jumped to QA and then jumped to sort of that advanced QA, the second level QA, and then jumped to dev, that was actually super valuable for me, because it helped me understand where QA is coming from on testing the software. So when I'm writing things, I'm constantly thinking about that QA experience that I had when I'm writing stuff, and thinking about, well, how is QA going to test this, and how are they going to come at it, and stuff like that. So it was super valuable experience. So if you can do that, that might be something to look into as well. Yeah, I do understand where you're coming from though. But yeah, you might have to just get in there and just, sort of jump your way to the position that you actually want. Sometimes that's the way it works out, but you know, it could be better for you in the long run if you do go that way also. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. Let's see. Yeah, I figured I'm using LLVM for, is that reflection? Yeah, it was sort of a shot in the dark. Yeah, so I don't know. I'd have to see some code. If you want to DM me at some point, I can take a look at it. Yeah, I hope that advice helps anyways. That was kind of how I wound up getting into dev, right? Dev was what I wanted to do, but I kind of had to work my way towards that. Doesn't go that way for some people, especially people that interview well, but yeah. Let's see. Casual Vim Enjoyer over on the YouTube side, how are you doing? Following your videos for a while now, episode 38, where you create a material system and noticed that the testbed app is leaking memory like crazy. Yes, it is at that point in the series. Yep. Yeah, so there's lots of places, like, so the testbed application is like just that, right? It's designed to be a testbed application. Like, I'm not really worried about, I didn't really worry as much about cleaning things up because it's a testbed, right? I'm only using it to test features. So as long as the features aren't leaking memory, which that early in the series, some of them might have been, you know, I wasn't as worried about it. We do lock a lot of that stuff down later in the series, though. So that is something that we address, for sure. See, I thought I forgot to release memory somewhere, and I used Valgrind to make sure, but I found out there was the NVIDIA drivers. Is this normal, or do you solve this further along in the series? So, yeah, there were a couple of things that I was doing that were causing NVIDIA drivers to leak memory too, which is a fun way you can shoot yourself in the foot with Vulkan. Yeah, but a lot of that stuff's been resolved, for sure. You know, and we're probably going to have to revisit that every once in a while as we're putting this game together as well. Okay, let's see, where was I? So this is going to be the item data block size. Now, strings. So strings are going to be a little bit different because strings essentially need we have language count, right? And that's going to be states, languages, length, right? So we have, for each language, we have, should be the same number of records, right? We are probably going to have to do, a little bit of validation on how we actually want this to work through the editor, right? Because we don't want to have a situation where we have jagged arrays between languages, right? We definitely don't want that. So I'm going to have to think about, in terms of the string editor, how we actually handle that. But for right now, I'm just going to cheat, and I'm going to say string count is states, languages, sub-0, length, right? And that's going to be the number of strings that we have. And then string length size equals 4, right? So the way that we're going to have to do this, and I can't think of any better way to do this, is we're actually literally going to have to loop through each language, and we are going to have to examine each individual string for each language, total all of that up, get the length of it, and then, you know, add that length to, or add 4 to that length to actually store the length, and go through and tally all of that up to get this final number. Let me see. Spiro raiding with a party of 17. Thank you so much for the raid, Spiro. How's it going, buddy? If you guys aren't following Spiro, he is a GigaChad developer here on Twitch. He is making a game currently that is, well, he's writing the game engine in C. but he is using the browser and just the standard DOM as his renderer, right? Which is completely out of the box thinking, right? And so he compiles rather his C engine to WASM, and then interacts with the DOM via his engine code. And it's a really clever setup. So if you're interested in that, I definitely say give him a follow and check him out next time he's online. Plus, he's always talking about tech news and stuff like that. So it's definitely a good channel to follow. So welcome, Raiders. How many of you guys are new here? Because I know Spiro's audience and my audience kind of line up a little bit. So I can go through and do a quick intro if you guys would like. Didn't Soding do something similar, did he? I don't actually know. Spiro has all the hot takes? Yeah, I would say the molten takes. Like molten lava. Not in a bad way, though. You're new here. Okay, alright. You know what? Let me go ahead and I will give a quick intro. Let's see, I could just use this window, actually. So what we're doing on this channel is we've built a game engine entirely from scratch using C and using Vulkan as our initial rendering backend. I say initial rendering backend because we have plans to support Direct3D and Metal at a minimum, potentially with others. It is cross-platform compatible, so it runs on the desktop environments of Windows, Linux, and Mac OS currently. And we have other platforms planned for the future. Mobile, I'd actually like to get this running on Switch at some point, but you know, that's all future stuff. So the engine itself is free and open source. It is very early days in development, right? So it's not something that I would suggest you pick up and use just yet, but we are actually in the middle of creating the first game with it. So what you're seeing here is actually from our testbed application, which is sort of a test driver application that we have just to test out features as we add them to the engine. So we've got a basic PBR rendering pipeline set up with cascading shadow maps, the ability to render both bitmap text as well as what we call system text, which loads a true type font, UTF-8 text rendering, our own custom UI system, the ability to select objects and manipulate them around. We have a basic editor set up, which actually we're going to be standardizing a little bit. And so the entire engine itself is Apache 2.0 license, which basically says if you want to use it for something, whether it's personal or commercial, you can absolutely do that. The only thing that I ask is that you say you use it, and that's literally it. There will never be any sort of licensing or royalty fees of any kind. It'll always be free. So the idea here is that this is an educational exercise into a way of building a game engine. It's not the only way of building a game engine. It's not even necessarily always the right way to build a game engine. But what we do is we do deep dives and explore and try out different things. Some of these things work, some of these things don't. Some things we try things that I know are not going to work, but so that we can do a deep dive into it and explain why and sort of explore that, right? So it started off as a YouTube tutorial series, and we changed formats a little bit as the engine started to grow. Tutorial series doesn't really work once you get past a certain point in your code base. And so we really just, wound up changing formats a few times and ultimately landed on this live stream format that we have here. And so we do stream to YouTube and Twitch. We have a Discord community of about 1,000 people now. I haven't gotten a recent count on that, but it is over 1,000. And of course, we've got the GitHub link here, a Patreon link. I don't have any sponsors or anything. The only sponsors are you guys, the viewers. So, I don't shill anything, right? So all of that said, we are actually using this engine now to create our first game. And ironically, what we see here on the screen is not C. It is indeed HTML and JavaScript. You're not going crazy. Because we are building an external tool for the game itself, right? And so what we're doing is we're building a very basic item editor and string editor. And the string editor has to do with localization. So we've got different languages in here of different strings. So we support English, Brazilian, Portuguese, and Japanese. So all of our strings are localized, and so the items will reference those localized strings. And so there's that. That's what we're currently building, and we're also building. Let me just pull this up off screen. Give me one moment, and I'll pull up a couple of visual things so that you can actually see that. Come on. Okay. So, what we are working on is a game called Shadows of Alumina. It is a 3D isometric action RPG. And so it's designed to be open world, but zoned. And we'll get into what zones mean here in just a second. And one of the main goals behind this game is to encourage exploration and going different places and trying different things. It will have some of a bit of a non-linear storyline. There will be some actions and choices that you can make that will choose how the story sort of ends, right? We haven't really defined a lot of those yet, but what we have done is we have actually defined like all the different races that are going to be here, all of the different some of the different continents. We'll look at that in just a second. We also have some lore that I'm not going to go into right now, but we have gone over it a few times on stream. Some game mechanics, things like that. And so this is just sort of a little visual so that you guys can kind of get an idea of what the world map looks like. So we have 3 different continents right now in the world of Alumina. And so we have this Thaldor region here, which has got a bunch of different zones in it. This is what I mean when I say zones. We have Dravenholm, and we have Valora, which is still kind of under construction. We still have a lot of work to do here. And then we also have Hoshizora, which is sort of this it's part of Valora, but it's kind of like a bunch of islands off to the side, right? And so we have all these different areas that we're going to eventually wind up proceeding through and playing through, right? So we've got a decent amount of background lore already. We're going to be developing a lot more of that on stream, but just to kind of give you guys some visual stuff to look at and get you kind of thinking about what some of those things might be. This is that's what that's for. So let's see. Poke my head in here every once in a while and watch, but haven't been an avid follower. Do you have a day job and do this on the side? Yes. So thank you for popping in every once in a while. I appreciate that. Yeah, I do have a day job. I do work full time. So this is purely a hobby thing, right? So I try not to do too much work off camera, although I have to do some work off camera because otherwise we'll never get it done. But I would say I put in less than part-time hours per week, right? So it's probably maybe 10, 15 hours a week that I put into it. And that's, why it's taken us 4 years to make the engine, right? That and also all the producing and the editing and all that other stuff that goes into running a channel, right? That also all takes time as well. But yes, to answer your question, yes, I do have a day job, and I do this on the side. Yep, I'd love to do this full time, but I don't have the follower base for that. Brian, good to see you. Let's see. Do you think there's a moral cost to working in finance? Seems like the only pull is the money. I can't answer that because I've never worked in finance. So yeah, I'm not qualified to answer that, unfortunately. I have the closest thing I can say, however, is I have worked in the casino industry before, and I can say that there are moral issues with that, which is why I don't. One of the reasons I don't do that anymore. But yeah, Brian. Well, I wasn't asking that, but I appreciate you being so forward about it. Essentially the same thing. Yeah, essentially the same thing. Um, Very cool. All right, I appreciate that. Yeah. So this is what we're making right now. Like I said, is an item editor for that RPG. An item, and I'm calling this I called it the item database, but it's actually going to be strings too, and probably other stuff. Um, so I don't know. It's kind of like a flat file database that we're making. We're actually talking about the file format now. What was your work? What do you mean? And what? If you're talking about the casino industry stuff, I was a developer. Yep. Markets equals you win some, you lose some. Casino equals you lose some, you lose some. C equivalent. Yep. Yeah, house always wins on that stuff for sure. Let's just say it's ruined slot machines for me forever, right? Because I fully understand how those things work under the hood. So, not that I was big into them ever, before that, but yeah. Okay. So I think we were talking about getting a size of all of the strings that have been saved up to this point. So we have our item data block size here, and what we're trying to do is get the string data block size, right? So basically what we need to know is when we go to create this new array buffer, how big does this thing need to be? And so that is essentially what we're talking about, right? Now, there are a couple pieces to this, right? So this is the generic header, right? We're also going to have a DB header, right? So we're going to have, let's just say DB header first, right? We'll do this. And so the DB header is actually going to have a couple of things. So we can actually have, let's just grab this for a second. So the DB header is going to be, again, another numeric. And what we're going to want is we're going to want, I guess, we should probably have all of these items, right? So we need to know the item field count. The item field count, I guess, could be tied to version too. Right, so this is going to be version. Let's go ahead and just put that in. You know what? Let's do that. We'll put version here. Let's also make this a little easier on ourselves. Let's do offset here, right? And we'll do that, right? Right, we'll just keep kind of moving that forward, right? So we can just do offsets for all of these instead of having to like hard code those. That way, if we insert more properties somewhere, all we have to do is just kind of move it around, right? Okay, so data block size is not what we want here, though. We want item field count, right? And then we want item count is going to be the next thing. And then we want item data block size. So we'll do data block size, right? So that's going to be that. And then I guess we could probably, we should probably also figure out what we need for the string stuff and put that here as well. So in order to get these strings, what we're going to do is, I guess we're going to have to do, let's do I equals 0, I is less than language counts. Oops. Language counts plus I. And then for each individual language, then we'll do another loop. So we'll do j equals 0, j is less than string counts plus j. And then what we'll do is we'll do string total size, and we'll start that at 0. Okay? And so for each one of these, for each string record, we're going to store two things. We're going to store the size, right? So we're going to say string total size plus equals 4. So that's going to be the size of the string, right? And then we're actually going to get a measurement of that string, which we have this string byte length, right? So here we'll do string total size plus equals string byte length, and we're going to do states languages sub I, and then within that array we're going to do sub j, right? And that's going to be the string. So for each record, we're going to store, we're going to reserve enough space to store the length of the string, right? Which is always going to just be a 32-bit integer. And then we're going to do enough storage beyond that to store the actual string itself in bytes, right? So that'll take care of our multi-byte characters as well. So that's going to give us the total amount of string storage that we actually need. So I guess actually, let's just do that, right? Okay. Now, for this, we need, we already have string counts. We already have, I guess we just need string count and then string total size, right? So we'll come down here. We'll do string counts, and we'll do string total size, right? So this will be items header. This will be strings header. That's how we're going to read that, right? Now we have, I guess, string total size. That should probably be string. This should probably be data block size. Oh, that really didn't work. Okay. Okay. So we'll do, where is it? Here. Okay. So our entire data block size, which actually we need to take this stuff and move it down. actually, I guess we don't need to move it down, right? We have everything we need up here. Okay, so data block size is going to be, let's see. So we need to calculate how big our items header is going to be and our strings header, right? Which is going to be 12 and then 8, right? So I guess we could put that as well. We could put items header size equals 12, and then strings header size equals 8, right? And then data block size is going to be items header size plus strings header size plus let's see, item data block size plus string data block size, right? And that eliminates this to do. All right, so this data block size is then what we use along with the file header size to determine how big the array buffer actually needs to be. And that will give us room to store everything that we need to store, and we should be good. Let's see. Let me catch up on some of the messages here. Just how sinister are slot machines, and are you even allowed to tell us? So there's only so much I can actually mention, right? Because a lot of that's locked behind NDA. But I will say this. There are lots of regulations keeping them from being rigged like you might think they are, right? Lots of people say, oh, they're rigged. No, they're not, and they legally can't be. And there's a process that prevents them from being so. You know, there is a certain certification process that they have to go through that is very, very expensive, and nobody wants to screw with that, right? There's lots of rules and regulations around keeping them fair, right? Essentially, the way that they work is, and I could say this because this is like public knowledge somewhat. Essentially, every slot machine has what's called a return to player percentage, right? So it's a percentage of what you put in versus what you get back over the course of billions of spins, right? And spin being when you click the button once, the spin. And usually that's going to be less than 100%, right? Which means, you know, over the course of, let's say you have a machine that's like 96%. That means for every dollar you put in, you get 96 cents back on average over the course of billions of spins, right? Sometimes you'll lose a lot, sometimes you'll hit a jackpot, but when you extrapolate that out over a long period of time, you know, that's what it winds up being. So over the long run, that's how casinos can stay in business, is because of the return to player percentage. What if the digital slot machine engineer adds a secret key press win combo? Then they go to jail. Like, I'm not even kidding. That's like not... It's like so highly regulated, like you'd never get away with that. Not for very long anyways. Could you build a slot game? Yeah, I could, but I don't want to. I don't want to. Let's see. Do you have an estimate of the size of your game so far? So size in terms of what? Do you mean like bytes, lines of code? How big the world's going to be? Thank you for the follows, by the way. Appreciate that. Disk space. No idea yet. I'm going to do my best to try and keep it... I want to keep it under 4 gigs. And I think I can actually keep it smaller than that. Ideally, I'd rather keep it under 2 gigs. And I've got some ideas on how I'm going to do that. But, yeah. I don't want it to be... Yeah, under DVD size. Yep. Yeah, so, you know, I still want it to look good, but I don't want it to be... I don't want it to be huge, right? And especially if we ever do a mobile version of it, it's got to be pretty small, right? Okay. So we have this. The next thing is to write the DB entries. So we're gonna say, instead of DB entries, we're gonna say item entries. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna loop through all of the items, right? Which I think we already have an item count up here. Yes, we do. So we're gonna do 4 U32. I guess we'll just do I again. Equals 0, I is less than item count plus I, right? And for each item, we're essentially going to have, ooh, this is going to be interesting to figure out, actually. So what we're not going to do is we're not going to write this to memory in the typical object-oriented fashion, where you write ID and then you write the name, string ID, and then you write, the description, and then you write, whatever, all in memory sequentially, right? Because the way that this is going to be organized in memory is it's going to be ID, 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 name, 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 description, 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 value, 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 etc. Right? It's going to be arranged that way. So actually, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to use I as an offset into the block of memory plus what the actual field is that we're writing. And so we're going to have to offset into the memory and then write the integer at that particular place. Now that's going to wind up being fairly easy because we know that everything we're dealing with here is integers. So it's always going to be 4 bytes. Structure of arrays, exactly. That is the layout that we're going to use, right? And then that's going to make it very easy when we go to query data, because everything will be indexed by that ID, right? So we could just blast into those as we need them. Tammin, how's it going? Good to see you. Make a simple game in Unreal 5. Oops, it's 30 gigabytes. Yeah, exactly. No, thank you. Messed up some compiler flags for Godot, and now my version is about 4/3 of the original binary. Managed to add some bloat. Yeah, that'll happen to the best of us for sure. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and put. Let's see. I don't want to do. What do I want to call this? I guess we can call this array offset, right? And we're just going to do I times 4, right? So that'll give us the offset into the initial array that we're talking about. Let me open up. Let me open this up here on the other side as well. Just so that I can view all the fields that we have. So ID is not something that we have to write out, right? So item type, I guess, is going to be the first thing, right? So I guess we'll have to put this here, right? And what we'll do is we'll do view set uint32 because this is item type is unsigned, right? Item type is unsigned, yes. Equipment class is not necessarily, okay. So we want to set uint32, and then what we're going to do is, so the offset at this point will be the beginning of the item block, right? Which is where we're going to start for everything. So we're going to say offset plus array offset, right? And then we're going to do we're actually going to do let field index equals 0, right? And then we're going to do, should we do this in line? We should probably do, we'll need to get the offsets into, or the offset of the array, right? So this is the global offset in the file. Then we'll need the array, the offset within the global file where the array starts. And then we'll need the array offset where that actually is in the array. I guess we should say probably field offset, right? This should probably be I can't type. And then we'll do array offset is going to be let's see, it's going to be field index times item count times 4. So for in the first field, that's going to be 0, right? For the second field, that's going to wind up being 1 times whatever the item count is times 4, which is, the integer. Yeah, I think that's right. That looks right to me. Okay. Array offsets. Right, so I guess we could actually just do this. Right, and then just to make it a little bit more explicit as to what we're doing, we could just do that. Right, that way, when we get to the end of this line, all we have to do is field index plus plus. Right, and that will allow us to get to the correct point in the file when we're actually reading it. Okay, so item type was the first, name string ID is the second, and that is 0 base 2, so that can be a uint32 as well. Oh, wait a minute, I didn't actually set the value here. So we should probably do let item equals state items sub I. Right, the value we actually need to set, you dingus. So this is going to be item.item type, and we want to use little endian for that. All right, let's see. Oh, stretch redeem. I appreciate that. Need that actually. By the way, my issue was that with LOVM, you have to add a specific clang arg for the header that you're parsing. Yeah, Dr. Elliott, you're gonna have to send me a sample of what that looks like in Discord later. I'm curious as to what that is. Added some hardening flags and optimization to go along with that. My game looks bigger than it is since my assets take under 10 megabytes currently. That's fair. Yeah. I know my game's not going to be that small, but eventually, once we get all the 3D models and more so the textures, I think, than the models, that's what's really going to take up space. But we're going to use some compression algorithms and stuff in our format to help with that, hopefully. Do you have a suggestion where I could learn more about the ECS paradigm, books, articles, etc.? So there are plenty of YouTube videos that you could read up on it. I don't have anything specifically because anytime I've had to use ECS in the past, it's always been something I've had to do for a bespoke purpose, and I've always had to roll one from scratch. So that probably wouldn't be helpful. We're not going to actually be using an ECS in this engine. And so I would say, with a little bit of caution, learn what ECS is, but think about ways to avoid it if you can. Because generally speaking, ECS tends to be overkill for most projects. You generally don't need it. I usually refer to ECS as entity complication system, right? Because it's you generally don't need it, especially for smaller projects, right? But yeah, definitely do read up on it. Do understand what it's about so that you can reason about that whole argument of, well, why is it necessarily overkill, or why is it not the best thing, right? Don't just take my word for it. Do your research on it for sure. But I would say, yeah, YouTube sources. I think Game Engine Architecture, the book, actually touches on it. But yeah, it's well, Magetz, that's not necessarily always true either, right? So ECS is a fancy name for data-oriented entity system. That's all. It's not, though, unfortunately. Now, if you watch the Mike Acton talks about it, yes, it is, right? But Unity sort of bastardized the term a little bit, right? With their entity component system. And I'm talking pre-dots, right? And so, like, their version of it is a little bit weird. Unreal's version of it is a little bit weird because Unreal has this sort of shoehorned in after the fact component system that's also kind of working with their already existing object hierarchy, which is kind of the way you did it in the 90s. But not every ECS out there is a good data-oriented design either. There's a lot of them out there that use heavy OOP, which is not data-oriented and is not cache efficient. So you'll have to be careful about that as well. I hope that makes sense. Blah, blah, pointer hopping, bad, blah, blah. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Lots of blah, blah. All right. Trying to think if there's a better, cleaner way to do this, but I don't think so. I don't think it really matters. So essentially, we have item type. The next thing is going to be the name string ID, right? So it's going to be name string ID. And in this case, we are not incrementing the offset pointer, right? Because we are writing all of these in a block. So we don't want to offset that. What we want to offset is the field index and, of course, the item, right? So just by having this in place, we'll automatically be at the right section in memory. And so now we can just say name string ID, assuming I've got this calculation correct, which I'm pretty sure that I do. This looks like fun. I'm building a heavy ItemDB object-based idle game and just went through some of this fun for my little web idle game. Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, so we're just kind of trying to figure out, this is not only going to be used for this editor, but we're going to use this same file format to actually load it into the C game engine. So that'll be interesting as well. By saying that, I should try my maximum to avoid it. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, or does it? If it provides more scalability, flexibility, performance. Yeah, so as with anything in programming, right, there's benefit versus cost, right? And so you have to reason about that. Do you need that flexibility? Do you need that scalability? If you do, a lot of those things tend to come at the cost of performance, right? Especially the more generic you go. Because a lot of these ECS systems sort of don't deal with the problem immediately. They put everything behind virtual functions and abstract interfaces and all this other stuff, and push all of the problem dealing off to, the author of the game. And the problem with that is you tend to wind up with a lot of memory fragmentation unless you design it very, very carefully. And I think that most systems out there don't do that. And the ones that do are part of also something that, is designed for, large teams or very large projects. But in general, smaller projects probably don't need all of that complexity, right? More than likely, you probably don't need one, right? You already know the types of things that you're going to have in your scene, right? You know that you're going to have static meshes. You know you're going to have a skybox. You know that you're going to have animated skeletal meshes, right? Why do you need component systems for that stuff? You know what the types are. You know what the data is that you're dealing with. Deal with the data. Don't deal with abstractions. If that makes sense. ECS is literally entities that has assigned components from pools, and the pools are updated. So Magetz, you were talking about the ideal design of ECS, right? But I'm saying not all ECSs out there are designed that way. So you have to be very careful in which ones you look at. Because some of them use pooling, some of them are intelligent about memory use, and some of them are not, right? They're not all built the same way. So you have to be very, very, very careful in what you look at. And, you know, if you're going to use a library, you need to look through that code and reason about what they're actually doing with the data. Let's see. I went back and drew everything in a PowerPoint with circles and arrows to help me map out the flow of my objects and how they interact. That's a good idea. Also got over writing in item data, so I ended up writing a janky editor to add, update, delete, and read the data. Yeah, that's essentially what we're doing now. Yep. Systems act on components with no regard to the entities. Yeah, that's the ideal, right? Most ECS implementations don't have systems as first-class citizens. Yep, I would agree with that. Like I said, it depends. It depends on how it's written. And again, ECS has been a little bit bastardized by Unity, right? The way that they talk about it. Yeah, ECS system is therefore grammatically correct because ECS stands for entity/component/system. Yeah. And again, it's been bastardized to the nth degree. So it's like it's a very nebulous topic to talk about and understand. As opposed to ATM machine. I hate when people say ATM machine. Drives me nuts. Entity component system. Yeah. Okay. So we have name string ID. We have description string ID. Now, I could just do this in a loop, right? But I'm doing this a little bit more. I'm being a little bit more explicit about it so that I can reason about exactly what data is going where. Because if the order of these ever changes or something like that, we could be in a world of hurt, right? If I just loop through it. So this is going to be, let's see, cost. And then value is next. I suppose what I could do, like I could wrap these in a function, right? So I don't have all this repetition, but I don't care. It's a freaking external temporary tool. I'm not going to spend my time making this super clean, right? It just doesn't make sense. Quality ID. Quality ID. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. That's why some people push the term ACS for Unity's or Unreal's bastardized version to try to disambiguate ambiguous component system. Ambiguous complication system begets. That's what it is. Entity complication system and ambiguous complication system. That's what those are for. All right. So we have quality ID. The next one is going to be weight. And unique count. I suppose I don't need to put the comments right, but like it visually splits it up, so I'm doing it. Use effect ID. Yeah, okay. And then use effect string ID is next. Use effect string ID. str, yep, okay. So we've got that. Oh, is this? Then we have max charge count. Hopefully I've gotten this right and haven't bollocksed any of it. Cooldown. Right, so that covers our basic item, right? And then we have all of these other things as well. So there are a couple of signed integers in here. So one of those is going to be the equipment class. Right, so this needs to actually be set int32, and this is going to be equipment class. Right, and then the equipment slot is also going to be a signed integer, right? Because those can be -1 for not used. Most things don't work that way, but there's a couple of them that do. The next thing is going to be equip effect ID. Right, so we have that, and then we have the string that goes along with that, or the string ID rather. Effect string ID right there. Okay, so that's that one. And then we have these effects, like the strength effect. So we have agility effect, mind effect, and then vitality effect. Right? So we've got those, and then we just have min damage, max damage. So this is going to be min damage, max damage, and then we have attack rates, and finally, at least for now, we have additional 0. Right? So, we'll pull all that item, or all of that for each individual item, right? Which is a lot of data. It's fine. And then, once we've done that, we should be able to move forward. So we'll say offset plus equals item data block size, right? Because item data block size, if we've done this correct, will essentially be after this last byte is written here, or last set of bytes is written here. So move past the items. And then we have strings. string entries. Let's see. Old Unity / Unreal CBEM component-based entity model. I guess that's, yeah, I guess that's okay. That does make sense, yeah. But the problem is they called it ECS back in the day as well. Arbitrary complication system. I like that one. That's really good. You know what? We should add an ACS to our engine. Where as you write game code, it just arbitrarily adds complexity to it as you write it. We'll just put some macros in there that just, arbitrarily make your code way more complex than it needs to be. Seems like a good idea. All right, so string entries should actually be a little bit simpler. So all we have to do here is let's I equals 0, I is less than language counts plus I, right? So for each language, we are then going to write out the strings for that, right? So for let's j equals 0, j is less than string count plus j, right? And so in this case, what we're actually going to have is we need to write out the size of the string as well as the actual string itself, right? So part of the crappy thing is like we already calculated that up here. But we are still actually going to have to go we are still going to have to do this, right? So I guess we'll just loop through it again. It's fine. I don't normally like doing that, but like I really don't think it's going to be a problem for this. So we'll do string size is equal to that, right? And then we'll output, we'll output that. Let's see. In this case, I think we should move the offset pointer every time we write, because I think that just makes sense. So we want to set UN32 offset. Offset is actually just going to be where we want to be. So let's get rid of that. And what we're going to do is we are going to write, in this case, actually, the first thing we're going to write is string size. Right? So size of the string, then the string, right? Now, the only thing I don't actually know how to do, and I'm actually going to have to, I'm going to look at this in here in the command console for just a second. Let's b equals new array buffer. We'll just create this at like, I don't know, 16 or 256, whatever. And then let's v equals new data view b. Do we have So I don't actually see a function in here. How are we going to copy the strings into this? Right? Because I guess, I mean, we could copy it byte by byte, but that seems poopy, right? There's got to be some way to set, I would think. Maybe not, though. Thank you for the follow, by the way. All I see in here... Yeah, I guess we're just going to have to set a bunch of uints. Okay, that kind of sucks a little bit, because that means we're going to have to reverse that operation going the other way. I would have figured that they would have had a way to copy like a byte range, but apparently not. You can only set... Oh, that's lame. Okay. All right, so we're actually going to have to use this text encoder thingy. Let me see. Do we still actually have... Yeah, let me get this and just see what this returns. Returns a uint 8 array. Okay, so I guess we could just iterate that. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. All right, so we could just iterate that and then just copy the bytes individually. That kind of... Not gonna lie, that's kind of lame. I don't know why they don't have a way for me to actually just do that all at once. All right, so... I guess what we'll have to do is... We'll say bytes equals new text encoder, encode, and then we'll do state languages J. Right, and then we'll move this up here and then do, since this is just getting the length of that anyways, we'll just do bytes length. Right? And then here, I guess we'll just loop through the bytes and write them. Nivlak, how's it going? It's been a bit since I've seen you on here. How have you been? How much code did I break? All the code. No, not really. We're actually we're writing JavaScript tonight, which is weird. But it's for a external utility that we're working on writing. That made a little bit more sense. It's an item editor that we are writing for our RPG. And it made a little bit more sense, I think, to write it externally as opposed to trying to force feed through the whole thing through the engine. So, yeah, exactly. So what we're building is this. So it's the ability to edit items as well as localized strings that have, different language codes and stuff like that. So we're kind of tackling localization and items all in one. Does the engine support JavaScript? No. So what this is going to do is this is going to export to a binary file that we then load into the engine, right? So the binary file is actually what I'm building now in JavaScript, and then I'll have to, build code to read that in over on the C side. But yeah, I think it's going to work out pretty well because this will give me a nice, easy to use utility where I can create strings on the fly and I can create items on the fly and make those connections, and eventually we'll probably wind up creating our quests this way too once we get to that point. So I mistakenly called this the item database, but it's not really just items. So iterate the bytes array and add them to the buffer. Can't you just do, if I have, let me see, I feel like there's got to be a less dumb way to do this. So let me do this, let me do this, and then can I not do buffer? Is there not a way to copy anything? Transfer to fixed length. Max byte length. What is transfer? New byte length. I don't think that's what I'm going to want. I was kind of hoping, like, can I access the array data like that? And then do, was it view.get int32. I guess I could do view int32 at the byte offset of 4. So what did this effectively set then? Unless it treated it as a, where did it set that in the array then? Interesting. Okay, so that's not going to work. I was hoping we could just index it that way, but it doesn't seem to want to let me do that. Okay. So I guess back to this way. This just seems like it's going to be slow. But we'll do it this way for now, and we'll speed it up with something better. I'll research something better off camera and see if I can find a better way to do this. But let's do. So we want k is less than string size. And then we're just going to do view set uint, set uint 8. And we want to do offset. And then we want to do, I guess it's going to be bytes sub k is what we want to put in there. And then we want to say true for little endian. And then do offset plus plus, right? Because we're only moving 1 byte at a time. So I think by the time we do this for all strings, we should have our entire thing written, right? So we write the size of the string, and then we write the string itself, and then we move on to the next record. Oh, we didn't do offset plus equals 4. Need to do that there. Okay, that should do it for writing the file out, I believe. Gonna lurk because, you know, yeah, I get it, Nivlak. Thanks for stopping by, though. That's awesome. Am I holding my data in JSON format? No. So, we do have some temporary hard-coded stuff here that I'm just using as test items, but everything's going to be encoded in binary in this file that we're writing here. So this is basically our binary encoder, where we're going to write all of our item data to a specific layout in a binary file, and then that's going to be ingested by the engine. And so eventually we're going to wind up getting rid of these here, and we're going to load these straight in from the binary file. Let's see. There'd be potential issues with special characters, converting special character to string to binary using that method. I don't think so because I'm storing the code points. And I'm dealing with the individual bytes directly. So I'm not dealing with like the length of the string. I'm dealing with the raw bytes here. So like for UTF-8, if you have multi-byte characters, it's going to use those bytes in the correct order. They're going to be stored in the correct order, just as they would be if they were stored in a string. And then when we pull them out and actually use them as a string, it should just work. That's the way I handle it on the C side, and we do some checking for specific character sequences to determine byte length of each individual character and stuff like that, but yeah. So if you're talking about multi-byte sequences, this should still work. Remember, emojis had multiple Unicode entries. If you do console.log on some emojis, they have like a length of 4 or something. Yeah, so we're taking that into account. That's one of the reasons I'm doing it this way. Because we have this text encoder encode. This gives me an array of the actual raw bytes, not just the string length, which would be different, right? So we were testing it with... where is it? We were testing it with, a Japanese string, right? So it gives me the actual code points of what those symbols actually use under the hood. And then, the byte length here is actually 21, as opposed to if you were to just do this dot length is 7. Yeah, so we're handling this the way that UTF actually works under the hood. And we do the same thing over in our C engine. So we should be good as far as that goes. As long as I'm writing it into the file correctly and then reading it back out correctly, we should be good. I know you're probably going to be the primary user. I'm going to be the only user. One thing I came across, haven't implemented yet, is a recycling bin. I recommend it. That's an interesting thought. Yeah, okay. I mean, I could see that. Like, oh crap, I didn't mean to delete that string, right? But I should mention, as far as the way that these are going to be implemented in memory, if you delete an item, it doesn't actually delete anything. It doesn't remove anything. It doesn't remove anything out of the arrays. It doesn't remove what's held in memory, right? It basically just says, hey, this is free. You could just use it. So like, instead of deleting something, if you decide you no longer want to use a string, you just replace it with something else, for example. Or the same could go for an item. Because we don't want to have like sparse arrays where there's like holes in the middle of your data set, right? I hope that makes sense. My case is different as I'm building data files in JSON. The files are driving my game in various ways, menus, items, skills, etc. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, I think this is actually probably a good point to stop because I do have to get up and go to work in the morning. And it is right around the time that we normally quit. So I am going to go ahead and find somebody to raid. Actually, it looks like Els Dragoon is still on, so we're going to raid them tonight. They're a team, a programmer and artist team that are making a game in 6502 assembly for the NES. And I always raid them whenever they happen to still be on. So I'm going to raid them tonight before they raid me. But yeah, thank you guys so much for being here, and we will catch you guys on the next stream. If you haven't already, give me a follow. I would really appreciate it, either on the YouTube side or the Twitch side. Trying to grow the channel, trying to get more people interested in game engine development and hitting some of this low-level stuff. So, but yeah, that's going to do it for us tonight. I will see you guys in the next stream. See ya.